Daniel Carter was 34 years old when he bought the house that would change everything he thought he knew about his life. He had been in the real estate business for almost 10 years by then, buying old houses, fixing them up, and selling them for profit. That was his thing. He was good at it. Some people called him cold for the way he worked. He would walk into a home where a family had lived for generations, and all he would see was square footage and potential profit margins. He never thought about the memories in the walls or the laughter that once filled the rooms. To him, houses were just buildings, nothing more. So when the listing for the small Victorian house on Maple Street came across his desk, Daniel did not think twice. The property had been sitting empty for 2 years. The previous owner, an elderly woman named Eleanor Mitchell, had passed away without any known family. No children, no relatives. Nobody came forward to claim the house. And eventually, the county put it up for auction to recover unpaid taxes. Daniel got it for almost nothing. Just a fraction of what it was actually worth. He remembered feeling pleased with himself as he signed the paperwork. Another easy deal. Another quick flip. He figured he would gut the interior, modernize everything, and have it sold within 6 months. The first time he visited the property was on a cold Tuesday morning in early November. The sky was gray and heavy with clouds that threatened rain. Dead leaves covered the front yard, and the old wooden porch creaked under his weight as he walked to the door. The key stuck in the lock for a moment before turning with a rusty groan. When Daniel stepped inside, he felt something strange, a heaviness in the air that he could not explain. The house smelled like old books and dried flowers. Dust floated in the pale light that came through the curtains. Everything looked like it had been frozen in time. The furniture was old but carefully arranged. Photographs in silver frames lined the shelves. A knitted blanket lay folded on the back of a chair, as if someone had just set it there, moments ago. Daniel told himself it was nothing, just an old house that had been closed up for too long. He started walking through the rooms, taking mental notes about what needed to be torn out and what could be saved. The kitchen would need a complete renovation. The bathroom was outdated by at least 40 years. The floors were original hardwood, which was good. Those could be refinished and would add value. He made his way to a small room at the back of the house. It looked like it had been used as a study, or maybe a reading room. There was a large window that faced the backyard, and beneath it sat an antique writing desk made of dark wood. The desk was beautiful in a way that Daniel rarely noticed anymore. It had carved details along the edges and brass handles on the drawers. For some reason he did not understand. Daniel felt drawn to it. He ran his fingers along the smooth surface and then pulled open the top drawer. Inside, he found a sealed envelope. His first thought was that it was nothing important. Maybe an old letter that Eleanor had forgotten to mail. Maybe a bill she never paid. But then he looked closer at the writing on the front of the envelope, and his breath caught in his throat. It said his name, not just his first name, his full name, Daniel James Carter, written in elegant cursive that looked like it had been done with great care. Daniel stood there for a long moment, just staring at it. His mind raced to find an explanation. Maybe the previous real estate agent had left it for him. Maybe someone from the auction house, but that did not make sense. No one wrote letters by hand anymore, and no one called him by his full name except for his father. His hands were not quite steady as he opened the envelope and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. The note was short, just 2 sentences written in the same careful handwriting. If you are reading this, you bought my house. I knew you would. We need to talk about your mother. Daniel read the words 3 times before they fully sank in. His mother. His mother had died when he was 6 years old. That was 28 years ago. He barely remembered her face anymore. Just small flashes of memory that came to him sometimes in dreams. The smell of her perfume, the sound of her voice singing softly, the feeling of her hand holding his. His father had never talked about her much. When Daniel was young, he used to ask questions. What was she like? What did she love? How did she die? But his father always gave short answers and quickly changed the subject. Eventually, Daniel stopped asking. He learned that some doors were meant to stay closed, and now here was this note from a dead woman he had never met, claiming she wanted to talk about the one person Daniel had spent his whole life trying not to think about. He told himself it was a mistake. It had to be. Maybe there was another Daniel James Carter out there. Maybe Eleanor Mitchell had known that person and somehow confused them. That was the only explanation that made any sense. But even as he thought this, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that he was lying to himself. Daniel folded the note and put it back in the envelope. He shoved it into his coat pocket and tried to continue his walkthrough of the house. But he could not focus anymore. Every room he entered, he found himself looking around with different eyes. Who was this woman? Why did she have his name written in her desk drawer? And what could she possibly know about his mother? By the time he left the house an hour later, the sky had opened up and rain was falling hard. Daniel sat in his car for a long time, watching the water run down the windshield. The envelope was still in his pocket. He could feel it there, pressing against his chest, like a secret waiting to be told. He thought about throwing it away, just tossing it out the window and driving off and never thinking about it again. That would be the smart thing to do. The safe thing, but he did not do that. Instead, he drove home with the note still in his pocket. That night, he lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a house on Maple Street and an old woman who somehow knew his name. Daniel had bought dozens of properties over the years. They were all just transactions to him. Simple, clean, uncomplicated. He thought this one would be the same. He was wrong. What he did not know yet was that Eleanor Mitchell had been waiting for him. Not just for months or years, but for decades. She had written that note, knowing exactly whose hands it would fall into, and the secrets she had hidden throughout that old house were about to tear open wounds that Daniel had spent his entire life trying to forget. The house on Maple Street was never just a house. It was a message in a bottle, sent across time by a woman who had made a promise long ago, and Daniel was only beginning to understand what that promise would cost him to uncover. Daniel tried to forget about the note. He really did. For 3 days, he went about his normal routine. He visited other properties. He met with contractors. He answered emails and returned phone calls. But no matter what he did, his mind kept drifting back to that envelope in the writing desk. Those 2 sentences written in careful handwriting. The way his full name had looked on the front, as if the woman who wrote it had known him personally. On the 4th day, he went back to the house on Maple Street. He told himself it was just to take more measurements for the renovation. That was the excuse he gave himself as he unlocked the front door and stepped inside. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was looking for answers. Daniel started in the study where he had found the first note. He searched every drawer of the writing desk. He looked behind the furniture and under the rug. He found nothing, just dust and old receipts and a few dried-up pens. He was about to give up when he noticed a small bookshelf in the corner of the room. It was filled with old hardcover books. Their spines faded from years of sunlight. Daniel walked over and began pulling them out one by one, flipping through the pages. In the 7th book he checked, a copy of some old poetry collection. He found another envelope. His heart started beating faster as he pulled it out. Just like the first one, it had his name written on the front. Daniel James Carter. Same handwriting. Same careful cursive. He tore it open and read the note inside. Your mother's name was Catherine. She had a small birthmark behind her left ear, shaped like a tiny crescent moon. She used to sing you to sleep every night. She loved you more than you will ever know. I was there, Daniel. I saw everything. Daniel had to sit down. The birthmark. He had forgotten about it until this very moment. But now the memory came flooding back. He remembered being very small, maybe 3 or 4 years old, sitting on his mother's lap while she brushed her hair. He remembered reaching up and touching the little mark behind her ear, asking her what it was. She had laughed and called it her secret moon. Nobody knew about that birthmark. His father had never mentioned it. Daniel had never told anyone about it because he had buried that memory so deep that he did not even know it was still there. How could a stranger know this? Daniel searched the rest of the house that day like a man possessed. He went through every room, every closet, every cabinet. He looked inside vases and behind picture frames, He lifted rugs and checked beneath loose floorboards, and he found more notes. One was tucked inside the pocket of an old coat hanging in the hallway closet. You used to be afraid of thunderstorms. Your mother would hold you close and tell you that the thunder was just angels bowling in heaven. You believed her every time. Another was hidden behind a photograph of a sunset that hung in the living room. When you were 5, you had a dog named Biscuit. He was brown and white and followed you everywhere. Your mother took a picture of you two sleeping together on the porch. That picture still exists. Ask your father. Daniel found 6 notes that day. Each one contained details about his childhood that he had long forgotten. Memories that had been locked away in some dusty corner of his mind. Things that only someone very close to his family could have known. By the time the sun went down, Daniel was sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by open envelopes. His hands were shaking. His mind was racing with questions that had no answers. Who was Eleanor Mitchell? How did she know all of this? And why had she hidden these notes throughout her house, as if she knew, with complete certainty, that Daniel would be the one to find them? The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He was not going to renovate the house. Not yet. Not until he understood what was happening. He called a private investigator named Robert Chen. Robert was someone Daniel had worked with before on a few complicated property deals. He was thorough and discreet, and asked the right questions without needing too many explanations. Daniel told him everything. About the house, the notes, the impossible details about his childhood. Robert listened without interrupting, and when Daniel finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. You want me to find out who this woman was? Robert said. It was not a question. I want to know how she knew my family. Daniel replied. I want to know why she was watching me. Robert took the case and promised to have something within a week. During that week, Daniel visited the house every single day. He found more notes hidden in places he never would have thought to look. Inside, a cookie tin in the kitchen, taped to the back of a mirror in the bathroom, folded up inside an old shoebox in the attic. Each note added another piece to a puzzle that Daniel could not yet see the full shape of. One note said, Your mother wanted to be a painter. She used to spend hours in the backyard with her easel, trying to capture the way the light fell through the trees. She never thought she was good enough. She was wrong. Another said, You were born on a Tuesday. It rained all day. But your mother said you were her sunshine. She called you that sometimes when no one else was around. Her little sunshine. Daniel did not know how to process any of this. Part of him wanted to believe it was some kind of elaborate trick. But who would go through so much trouble? And why? Eleanor Mitchell had been dead for 2 years. She had no connection to him that he could find. She had never reached out to him when she was alive. It made no sense. None of it made sense. When Robert finally called back, his voice was careful, measured. The way people sound when they are about to deliver news they know will be difficult to hear. I looked into Eleanor Mitchell, Robert said. She lived in that house for over 40 years. Never married. Never had children. Worked as a librarian until she retired in her 60s, kept to herself mostly. Neighbors said she was kind but private. Did she have any connection to my family? Daniel asked. There was a pause. That's the thing, Robert said slowly. On paper, there's nothing. No records linking her to anyone named Carter. No shared addresses, no overlapping social circles, no mutual friends that I could find. According to every database I checked, Eleanor Mitchell and your family existed in completely separate worlds. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Then how did she know all those things about me? About my mother? I don't know, Robert admitted. But I did find one thing that might be important. Eleanor Mitchell moved into that house exactly 2 years after your mother died. Almost to the day. And she never moved again. She stayed there for 4 decades, living alone, like she was waiting for something. Or someone, Daniel thought. He thanked Robert and hung up the phone. Then he sat in silence for a long time, staring at the pile of notes spread out on his kitchen table. Somewhere in that old house on Maple Street, there were more answers waiting to be found. Daniel was sure of it. Eleanor Mitchell had not just left him random memories. She had left him a trail, a path that led somewhere specific, and whatever was at the end of that path, Daniel knew it would change everything he thought he knew about his mother, his family, and himself. He was not ready for what came next, but he was going to find it anyway. The notes kept leading Daniel deeper into a past he had spent his whole life running from. Over the next 2 weeks, he found 17 more hidden throughout the house. Some were tucked into the pages of old magazines. Others were slipped behind wallpaper that had started to peel at the edges. One was even hidden inside the hollow leg of an old dining table. Eleanor Mitchell had turned her entire home into a treasure hunt, and Daniel was the only person meant to find the clues. But the more he read, the more confused he became. The notes painted a picture of his mother that did not match the story he had grown up believing. They spoke of struggles and sadness, of dark days and long nights, of a woman fighting a battle that nobody around her seemed to understand. One note in particular stopped Daniel cold. Your mother was not weak. She was sick. There is a difference that most people never learn. She fought harder than anyone I have ever known. And she loved you until her very last breath. Until her very last breath. Daniel read those words over and over again. Something about them did not sit right. His father had always told him that his mother died in a car accident. Quick and sudden. There one moment, gone the next. But the way Eleanor wrote about it made it sound like something else entirely. Something longer. Something more painful. Daniel knew what he had to do next. Even though every part of him wanted to avoid it, he had to talk to his father. The drive to his father's house took about 40 minutes. It was a small home on the outskirts of town. The same place where Daniel had grown up. His father, William, was 71 now, retired, living alone since Daniel's stepmother had passed away a few years back. When Daniel pulled into the driveway, he saw his father sitting on the front porch, reading a newspaper like he did every afternoon. William looked up as Daniel got out of the car, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or worry. They did not visit each other often. Their relationship had always been distant, held together by obligation more than affection. Daniel, his father said, folding the newspaper, did not expect to see you today. I need to talk to you about Mom. The words came out harder than Daniel intended. He watched his father's expression change. The old man's face seemed to close off, like a door being shut. What about her? Daniel pulled out one of the notes and handed it to his father. William took it slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he unfolded the paper and read. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then William let out a breath that seemed to carry 30 years of weight. Where did you get this? He asked quietly. There is a house I bought, Daniel said. The woman who lived there, Eleanor Mitchell, she left these notes hidden everywhere. She knew things about Mom, things that only someone close to her could have known. William closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. I always knew this day would come, he said. I just hoped I would be gone before it did. He gestured for Daniel to sit down in the chair beside him. Then, slowly, he began to tell the truth. Catherine Carter did not die in a car accident. When Daniel was born, something changed in her. At first, everyone thought it was just exhaustion from being a new mother. But the sadness did not go away. It got worse. Catherine would go days without sleeping. She would cry for hours without being able to explain why. Some days, she could not even get out of bed. The doctors called it postpartum depression. But back then, people did not talk about those things the way they do now. There was shame attached to it. William did not know how to help his wife. He did not understand what she was going through. And as the months passed, Catherine slipped further and further away. When Daniel was 4 years old, Catherine had a breakdown. She was hospitalized and later moved to a facility that specialized in treating mental illness. William was told it would only be for a few months, just until she got better. But Catherine did not get better. The darkness inside her was too deep. William made a decision that he had regretted every day since. He told Daniel that his mother had died. He thought it would be easier. He thought a clean break would hurt less than years of watching his son wait for a mother who might never come home. 2 years later, Catherine passed away at the facility. She had lost her battle with the illness that had taken hold of her mind. William never told anyone the truth. He buried it along with his wife and tried to move on. He remarried. He raised Daniel the best he could. But the guilt never left him. It lived in his chest like a stone he could not dislodge. Daniel listened to all of this without saying a word. He felt like the ground beneath him had cracked open. Everything he thought he knew about his childhood, about his mother, about his own history, it was all built on a lie. "Why did you never tell me?" he finally asked. William wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I was ashamed," he admitted. "Of her illness, of my own failure to help her, of the choice I made to lie to you." Every year that passed, the lie got bigger, and eventually, it felt impossible to undo. Who was Eleanor Mitchell? William looked up at the sky for a moment before answering. "Eleanor was your mother's best friend. They grew up together, went to school together. They were like sisters. When your mother got sick, Eleanor was the only one who never gave up on her. She visited her every single week at that facility, every week for 2 years, without fail. She was holding your mother's hand when she passed." Daniel felt something break inside his chest. "She watched me," he said, more to himself than to his father. "All these years, she watched me grow up." William nodded slowly. "After your mother died, Eleanor came to me. She wanted to be part of your life. She wanted to help raise you, to tell you stories about Catherine, to make sure you never forgot her. But I said no. I was too afraid. I thought if Eleanor was around, the truth would come out eventually. So I pushed her away. I told her to stay out of our lives. And she listened? She did. But she never stopped watching. I would see her sometimes. At your school events. At your baseball games. Always in the back. Always at a distance. She kept her promise to stay away. But she never stopped caring about you. She loved your mother too much to ever let you go completely." Daniel sat in silence, letting it all sink in. His mother had not abandoned him. She had been sick. She had fought as hard as she could. And even after she was gone, her best friend had spent 40 years keeping watch over the son Catherine left behind. Eleanor Mitchell had never introduced herself. She had never asked for anything in return. She had simply loved him from afar, honoring a promise made to a dying friend. And now, through the notes she left behind, she was finally giving Daniel the one thing he had been missing his entire life: the truth about his mother. Daniel did not know whether to feel angry or grateful or heartbroken. Maybe he felt all three at once. But as he sat on that porch with his father, watching the sun sink low in the sky, he realized something important. The story was not over yet. Eleanor had more to tell him. He could feel it. And whatever was waiting for him in that house on Maple Street, he was finally ready to face it. Daniel returned to the house on Maple Street the next morning with different eyes. Before, he had walked through those rooms as a stranger. Now, he understood that every corner of this home had been touched by someone who loved him. Someone who had watched over him from the shadows for his entire life. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking around. The dusty furniture, the faded curtains, the photographs on the shelves. This was not just some old woman's house. This was a shrine, a quiet monument to a promise that had lasted 40 years. Daniel spent the whole day searching for more notes. He found a few small ones tucked in places he had already checked, hidden so carefully that he had missed them the first time. But none of them contained anything new. They were just more memories. More fragments of a childhood he was only now beginning to remember. By late afternoon, Daniel was exhausted. He sat down on the old couch in the living room and stared at the fireplace across from him. It was a beautiful piece of stonework, built in a time when people took pride in small details. The mantel above it held a few old candles and a small ceramic bird that had started to fade with age. Daniel had checked the fireplace before. He had looked up the chimney and felt around the edges of the stone. But now, something made him look again. He got down on his knees and leaned inside the opening. The bricks were old and uneven. Some of them had small gaps where the mortar had crumbled away over the years. Daniel ran his fingers along each one, pressing gently to see if any were loose. Near the back, hidden in the shadows where no light could reach, he felt something. A small package wrapped in plastic. Daniel's heart pounded as he pulled it out. The plastic was dusty but sealed tight, protecting whatever was inside from the elements. He tore it open carefully and found one final envelope. This one was thicker than all the others. His hands were shaking as he opened it. Inside, there were 3 things. The first was a photograph. It showed 2 young women, maybe in their early 20s, standing together in a field of wildflowers. They had their arms around each other, and they were laughing. One of them had dark hair and bright eyes that seemed to sparkle even in the old, faded image. Daniel recognized her immediately. It was his mother, and the woman beside her, with lighter hair and a gentle smile, must have been Eleanor. Daniel stared at that photograph for a long time. He had never seen his mother look so happy, so free, so alive. In his memories, she was always a little sad, a little distant, but in this picture, she was radiant. She looked like someone who believed the whole world was waiting for her. The second item in the envelope was a letter, several pages long, written in the same elegant handwriting as all the other notes. Daniel began to read. "Dear Daniel, if you are reading this, then you have found your way to the end. I knew you would. I have been waiting for you for a very long time. My name is Eleanor Mitchell, and I was your mother's best friend. We met when we were 7 years old, and from that day on, we were inseparable. We went to school together, shared our secrets together, dreamed about the future together. Your mother was the sister I never had. When she met your father, I was the first person she told. When she found out she was pregnant with you, I was the one she called. And when you were born, I was there in the waiting room, pacing back and forth until the nurse came out to tell us you had arrived. I loved you before I ever saw your face, because you were part of her. When your mother got sick, I did not understand it at first. None of us did. She had always been so strong, so full of light, but the darkness that came after your birth was something none of us knew how to fight. I watched her struggle. I watched her slip away. And I watched your father make the impossible decision to send her somewhere she could get help. I visited her every week, every single week for 2 years. We would sit together and talk about you. She would ask me how you were doing, what you looked like, whether you had started school yet. I told her everything I could. I brought her pictures when I was able to get them. She kept them under her pillow and looked at them every night before she fell asleep. Your mother never stopped loving you. Not for one single day. Her illness was not a choice. It was a thief that stole her from everyone who needed her. But even in her darkest moments, you were her light. You were the reason she kept fighting for as long as she did. I was with her at the end. I held her hand and told her that I would watch over you. I promised her that you would never truly be alone. She smiled at me then, the first real smile I had seen from her in months, and then she was gone. Your father asked me to stay away. I understood his reasons, even if I did not agree with them. So I kept my distance. But I never stopped keeping my promise. I moved into this house so I could be close to you without being seen. I watched you grow up from afar. I saw you graduate from high school. I saw you struggle through your 20s, trying to find your place in the world. I saw you build your business from nothing into something real. There were times I wanted to reach out, times I wanted to tell you the truth, but I was afraid that you would not understand, afraid that I would only cause you more pain, so I stayed in the shadows and loved you quietly. When I got sick last year, I knew my time was running out. I had to find a way to give you the truth, without being there to explain it myself. So I started writing these notes. I hid them throughout my house, in places I knew a careful person would eventually find. Then I did something that might seem strange. I stopped paying my property taxes. I let the house fall into disrepair. I knew that eventually, it would go up for auction, and I knew that your company bought foreclosed properties in this area. I had been watching your business for years. I knew your patterns. I left this house for you on purpose, Daniel. Every note, every memory, every hidden envelope, It was all meant for you. I also want you to know something else. Do you remember the scholarship you received for college? The anonymous one that came out of nowhere during your senior year of high school? That was me. I could not be in your life the way I wanted to be, but I could still help you when you needed it most. I do not expect anything from you. I do not need your forgiveness or your gratitude. I only needed you to know the truth. Your mother was not a mystery or a ghost or a wound that could never heal. She was a real person who loved you with everything she had, and so did I. Take care of yourself, Daniel. Live a good life. And if you ever have children of your own, tell them about their grandmother. Tell them she was kind and creative and brave. Tell them she fought harder than anyone ever knew. I will be with her now. Wherever she is, I will find her. And I will tell her that I kept my promise. With all my love, Eleanor. The third item in the envelope was a small newspaper clipping. It was the announcement for Daniel's scholarship, dated 20 years ago. Eleanor had circled it in red ink and written a single word in the margin. Proud. Daniel sat on the floor of that old house and wept. He wept for his mother. He wept for Eleanor. He wept for all the years he had spent not knowing, not understanding, not realizing that he had never really been alone. And when the tears finally stopped, he made a decision. This house was not going to be torn apart and sold to strangers. This house was going to mean something. He just had to figure out what. Daniel did not sleep much in the weeks that followed. His mind was too full, too heavy with everything he had learned. He would lie awake at night thinking about his mother, trying to piece together the fragments of memory he still had left. The smell of her perfume, the sound of her laughter, the way she used to call him her little sunshine when no one else was listening. For 34 years, he had believed a lie. His mother had not died suddenly in a car accident. She had fought a long, painful battle against an illness that nobody around her knew how to help her with. And in the end, she had lost that fight alone in a facility, with only Eleanor by her side. It made Daniel angry at first. Angry at his father for hiding the truth. Angry at the world for failing his mother. Angry at himself for never asking more questions, for accepting the story he had been told without pushing harder. But anger is a fire that burns itself out eventually. And what Daniel was left with, after all that heat had faded, was something quieter. Something that felt almost like peace. He began visiting his father more often. At first, the conversations were awkward. There was too much unspoken history between them. Too many years of distance and silence. But slowly, they started to talk. Really talk. About Catherine. About the choices William had made. About the guilt he had carried for so long. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun went down, William looked at his son with tired eyes and said something Daniel never expected to hear. "I am sorry." 2 words. That was all. But they carried the weight of 3 decades. Daniel did not say anything right away. He just reached over and put his hand on his father's arm. They sat like that for a long time, watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple, and in that silence, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, that would take more time. But the beginning of it. The first small step toward healing. A few days later, Daniel asked his father to take him somewhere he had never been, his mother's grave. William had buried Catherine in a small cemetery on the outskirts of town. It was a quiet place, surrounded by old oak trees that swayed gently in the breeze. They found her headstone near the back, a simple marker with her name and the dates of her birth and death. Daniel stood in front of it for a long time without speaking. He had spent his whole life avoiding this moment, running from the pain of losing her, pretending that if he just kept moving forward, the past could not catch up with him. But now, standing in front of the place where his mother was buried, he realized something important. She had never really left him. She was in the memories that Eleanor had given back to him. In the stories his father was finally willing to share. In the parts of himself that he had inherited from her without even knowing it. His love of old houses, his quiet determination, the way he always noticed the small details that other people missed. Daniel knelt down and placed his hand on the cold stone. "I know the truth now," he said softly. "I know how hard you fought. I know how much you loved me. And I am so sorry it took me this long to find you. He stayed there for almost an hour, just sitting with her. When he finally stood up to leave, he felt lighter than he had in years. But there was one more grave he needed to visit. Eleanor Mitchell was buried in a different cemetery across town. Her plot was modest and plain. There were no flowers, no visitors, just a small headstone with her name and dates. She had lived 81 years, and in the end, she had been alone. Daniel changed that. He arranged for fresh flowers to be delivered to her grave every month. Lilies, because one of the notes had mentioned that they were her favorite. He also had a small bench installed nearby, so anyone who visited would have a place to sit and rest. But Daniel knew that flowers and benches were not enough. Eleanor had spent 40 years honoring a promise to his mother. She deserved more than a quiet grave that nobody visited. She deserved to be remembered. That was when Daniel made his decision about the house. He was not going to sell it. He was not going to tear it down and build something new. Instead, he was going to restore it. Every room, every detail, every piece of the life that Eleanor had built there. And when it was finished, he was going to turn it into something that mattered. Daniel spent the next 6 months working on the house. He hired local craftsmen who understood how to preserve old buildings without destroying their character. He refinished the hardwood floors and repaired the original windows. He kept the writing desk exactly where Eleanor had left it, in the small study at the back of the house. When the renovation was complete, Daniel opened the doors to the public. He called it Catherine's Place. It became a community center for families affected by mental illness, a safe space where people could come to find resources, support, and connection. There were counseling services and support groups, educational programs that taught people about conditions like postpartum depression, a library filled with books about mental health and recovery. Daniel put Eleanor's writing desk in the main room, right where everyone could see it. Next to it, he hung the photograph of the 2 young women laughing together in a field of wildflowers. And on the wall, he placed a plaque that told their story. The plaque read, "This house is dedicated to Catherine Carter and Eleanor Mitchell. One was a mother who fought bravely against an illness that no one understood. The other was a friend who kept a 40-year promise to watch over the son she left behind. Their love, loyalty, and courage inspire everything we do here. You are not alone." People came from all over town to visit Catherine's Place. Some came because they needed help. Others came because they wanted to give it. And some came just to read the plaque and learn about the 2 women whose friendship had outlasted even death. Daniel visited often. He would walk through the rooms where he had once searched for hidden notes, remembering how confused and lost he had felt back then. It seemed like a lifetime ago. In a way, it was. He was a different person now, softer in some ways, stronger in others, more connected to the world and the people in it. One afternoon, as Daniel was sitting on the porch of Catherine's Place, a woman approached him. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, with tired eyes and a baby in her arms. "Are you the one who started this place?" she asked. Daniel nodded. The woman looked down at her baby, then back at him. "I have been struggling," she said quietly. "Ever since he was born. Some days I do not feel like myself. Some days I do not feel like anything at all. I did not know where to go. But then someone told me about this place, about the story behind it." She paused, her voice catching. "I just wanted to say thank you for making somewhere like this exist, for making people like me feel less alone." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "You are not alone," he said. "That is the whole point." The woman smiled, just a little. Then she walked inside to find the help she needed. Daniel watched her go. And for the first time in his life, he understood why everything had happened the way it did. He had bought a house, expecting a simple transaction. Instead, he had found his mother. He had found Eleanor. He had found a purpose that was bigger than himself. And in the end, that old house on Maple Street had given him the one thing he never knew he was missing. A reason to stop running and finally come home.